This morning, and I'm like, well, let's check in on the Indiana Fever, see how their day is going. It's not going well. Look, it's not going well on anything they post, basically. They're getting absolutely destroyed. We're right in the middle of what I'm referring to as the Stephanie White effect.
This morning, someone checked in on the Indiana Fever to see how their day was going. It wasn't going well. Not on social media. Not in the stands. Not anywhere that matters. Right now, the organization is experiencing what can only be described as an organizational free fall, and the warning signs are everywhere if you know where to look. We're witnessing something rarely captured in real time, a franchise actively hemorrhaging the fan base it spent decades trying to build. The Stephanie White effect has officially begun, and what's happening isn't just about basketball strategy or coaching philosophy anymore. This is about an organization mismanaging the biggest phenomenon modern sports has ever seen, and the damage extends far beyond the court. The real catastrophe is happening at the box office, in the comment sections, and in the bank accounts of families who no longer feel welcome. What started as optimism has turned into something darker, a perfect storm where front office decisions, coaching implementation, and corporate activism have collided in spectacular fashion. The numbers are starting to leak. The backlash is building, and the breaking point is scheduled for next week. This is the story of how an organization took a generational talent and nearly destroyed everything in just a few months. When you scroll through the Indiana Fever's social media accounts right now, the pattern becomes immediately obvious. Every single post, regardless of content, is getting absolutely demolished in the comment sections. This isn't random criticism from scattered internet voices. This is systematic, organized rejection from a specific demographic that suddenly doesn't feel represented by the organization anymore. The timing is too precise, the messaging is too consistent, and the frustration is too widespread to dismiss as noise. We're in the middle of what's being called the Stephanie White effect, and it's reshaping the entire organization in real time. The sound of an organization in free fall is distinctive. It's not the sound of losing games, because championship teams lose games all the time and recover. It's the sound of losing your own fan base while they're watching. The Indiana Fever organization isn't just experiencing a dip in momentum or a temporary engagement drop. They're actively hemorrhaging the newly established fan base that was built on an unprecedented wave of interest that swept through American sports in 2024. This fan base was supposed to be the foundation for the next decade of growth, stability, and profitability. Instead, that foundation is cracking. The center of this storm is one specific player on the court, and the sudden aggressive implementation of the Stephanie White era. When Caitlin Clark arrived in Indianapolis, she didn't just bring talent. She brought millions of new eyes to professional women's basketball.
1,600 empty seats in the arena the other day. I believe it was, when I did my research, the second lowest attended game since Caitlin Clark has showed up. And some people have been like, well, is that's not because of Caitlin Clark's popularity. No, it's not. But it is because of how the Indiana Fever have treated her and how they use her in game.
She brought families from rural areas that had never watched the WNBA before. She brought traditional sports audiences from the Midwest and Texas who suddenly had a reason to care about professional women's basketball. The organization had a golden ticket, and for the first few months, everything was exactly as planned. Sellouts became the norm. Standing room only became expected. Merchandise flew off the shelves. This was the miracle that the WNBA had been waiting for since its founding. Then something shifted. The coaching staff began implementing a system that, whether intentionally or not, has systematically reduced the ball movement to Clark and her on-court influence. The marketing apparatus started pivoting away from promoting their franchise player and toward other initiatives. The front office began making decisions that, on their surface, might seem reasonable or progressive, but to the core audience that just rescued the franchise from irrelevance, felt like a fundamental betrayal of what they came to watch. The online backlash you see is just the surface level of what's actually happening. The real catastrophic damage is currently occurring at the box office, where the actual money changes hands. The real damage is happening in season ticket cancellations that haven't been publicly announced yet. The real damage is in the decision-making process of families trying to decide if they should renew their commitment to an organization that no longer seems committed to them. The comment sections are filled with people expressing genuine confusion and disappointment, and these aren't anonymous trolls. These are verified accounts of people who bought tickets, spent money on merchandise, and made a conscious decision to support this team. One game in particular stands out as a data point. The Indiana Fever played to 1,600 empty seats not too long ago. That was the second lowest attended game since Caitlin Clark arrived in the league. Think about that number for a moment. This is a franchise fielding a generational talent, someone who single-handedly elevated the entire league's viewership. This is a player who generates interest wherever she goes. And yet, there were 1,600 empty seats. Some people have tried to spin this, suggesting that maybe the empty seats aren't actually connected to how the Fever are treating their franchise player or how they're using her in games. But that argument doesn't hold water when you look at the historical context. Before the Stephanie White era fully implemented, sellouts were standard. Now they're rare. Numbers don't care about public relations strategies. Numbers don't care about how you spin the narrative or what talking points you prepare for the media. A mathematical disaster is a mathematical disaster. When you're fielding Caitlin Clark and you have 1,600 empty seats, that should trigger immediate panic in the front office. That should prompt emergency meetings. That should result in strategic pivots. Instead, what we're seeing is the organization doubling down on the exact same approach that created the problem in the first place. The pattern is becoming undeniable, and the organization's leadership seems either unwilling or unable to see what's happening right in front of them. Let's establish a baseline. Since Caitlin Clark arrived in the WNBA, the Indiana Fever experienced something that franchise had never experienced before in its history. Sold-out arenas became the standard. Standing room only became the expectation. Every game was an event. The buzz was electric. The merchandise was flying off shelves faster than vendors could restock them. This wasn't a localized phenomenon. This was a national story. Sports networks were covering not just the games, but the cultural impact. Caitlin Clark didn't just bring fans to basketball. She fundamentally changed the conversation about women's professional sports in America. She made it mainstream. So what changed? It wasn't voter fatigue. The casual sports fan doesn't get fatigued by watching generational talent. It wasn't a drop in Caitlin Clark's personal popularity. Her jersey sales remain strong. Her highlight clips still generate massive engagement when they appear on social media. The change wasn't about the player. The change was about the organization's treatment of the player and how they're utilizing their biggest asset on the court. What we're witnessing is massive consumer rejection of a product that the consumers felt they were promised. The fan base that flooded into Gainbridge Fieldhouse came from a very specific demographic: Middle America, traditional sports families, people from rural areas who suddenly had a reason to pay attention to professional women's basketball, people from conservative-leaning regions who invested their hard-earned money into tickets, merchandise, and season passes. These weren't people who were previously engaged with the WNBA. These were new customers who specifically came because of Caitlin Clark and the promise of watching a basketball revolution unfold in their own region. They believed they were supporting not just a player, but a transformation. The mathematical reality of 1,600 empty seats tells a different story than the one the organization wants to tell. In a 17,000 capacity arena, 1,600 empty seats doesn't sound catastrophic at first. But when you understand the context, when you understand that this is the same arena that was selling out regularly just months earlier, the number becomes devastating. That's not a sellout. That's not even close. That's a statement from the fan base that something fundamental has changed about their relationship with the organization.
Report that came from some fake Facebook page that claimed 2 million. Well, I can tell you, the studio show right before the game, 400,000. The Aces game, 343,000. Did the game even break 1 million viewers? That's even a lot lower than I thought. I want to know.
Let's talk about what 1,600 empty seats actually means financially. Each of those seats, depending on location and pricing, generates between $90 and $150 in direct revenue. Some seats generate more, some generate less. But a conservative estimate puts the lost gate revenue from that single game at somewhere between $144,000 and $240,000. That's a single night. That's one game. Multiply that across a season where the average attendance drops, and you're looking at millions of dollars in lost revenue that was supposed to be guaranteed by the Caitlin Clark factor. But gate revenue is only part of the equation. Every empty seat represents lost concession sales. Every person who didn't come to the game didn't buy a hot dog, didn't buy a drink, didn't buy snacks. Every empty seat represents lost parking revenue. Every person who didn't come is a person who didn't buy merchandise at the game. The ripple effect of that single night of 1,600 empty seats extends far beyond the ticket price itself. You're looking at a potential total loss of $200,000 to $300,000 for a single game when you factor in every revenue stream. The second lowest attendance since Caitlin Clark arrived is the key phrase here. It means the lowest attendance was something we've probably forgotten about, but the second lowest is recent enough to represent a trend. It's recent enough to suggest that the empty seats aren't an anomaly. They're a pattern, and patterns compound. If attendance continues to drop, the financial consequences accelerate. The organization can't operate a franchise on the assumption that every game will eventually sell out again. They have to operate on current reality. What changed between the sellout arenas and the 1,600 empty seats? The basketball hasn't deteriorated significantly. The team record hasn't collapsed. The quality of competition hasn't declined. What changed is the implementation of a system that has reduced Caitlin Clark's ball movement and on-court influence. What changed is the perception among fans that the organization is no longer fully committed to featuring their franchise player. What changed is the messaging coming from the organization's marketing apparatus, which has started to focus on initiatives beyond basketball. And what changed, most critically, is the feeling among the core audience that they're no longer the priority. Numbers don't lie. They don't respond to PR campaigns. They don't care about your narrative. A 1,600-seat drop in a 17,000-capacity arena is a mathematical disaster that should terrify front office executives. Understanding who the Indiana Fever's new audience is requires understanding geography and values. The franchise doesn't just pull from Indianapolis. The fan base extends from Texas all the way through the Midwest. You're operating in a region that has historically been underserved by progressive urban cultural movements. You're marketing to traditional families who work in agriculture, manufacturing, and service industries. You're reaching people who haven't had consistent access to professional sports content that resonates with their values. These are communities where professional sports are a form of family bonding, not a platform for activist messaging. When Caitlin Clark arrived, these families saw an opportunity. They saw a generational talent who played basketball with an intensity and skill that transcended gender. They saw someone who reminded them of the style of basketball they loved watching in the NBA. They saw a player who wasn't defined by her identity politics, but by her ability to dominate on the court. They saw a reason to invest their time and money into professional women's basketball. They saw a basketball revolution, exactly as the organization marketed it. These aren't wealthy urban progressives who attend sporting events as a cultural experience or a social statement. These are middle-class families for whom sporting events represent a significant financial commitment. A family of 4 buying tickets, parking, and concessions is spending $300 to $500 on a single evening. A season ticket is a substantial investment. Team merchandise adds up. These families are making calculated decisions about how to spend their disposable income, and they were making a conscious choice to support the Indiana Fever because of Caitlin Clark. The demographics at play here are critical to understanding what happens next. You're not operating in coastal urban centers where corporate activism is generally seen as positive and progressive. You're operating in regions where many people hold traditional values and are skeptical of corporate social messaging that they perceive as performative. When an organization abruptly pivots from promoting their superstar athlete to pushing other initiatives, the response is immediate and severe because it feels like a betrayal of the original bargain. The comment sections on the Indiana Fever's social media accounts tell the story of this demographic disconnect more clearly than any analysis could. The people commenting aren't anonymous haters. They're verified accounts. They're people with profile pictures, with histories of engagement. Many of them have purchase history. Many of them are repeat customers who have been to multiple games. And they're expressing genuine confusion and disappointment about what the organization is becoming. When a father from rural Texas or a family from northern Indiana invests their money into season tickets, they're making a statement about their values. They're saying that they believe in supporting this team, this player, this organization. But there's an implicit contract in that relationship. The contract says that the organization will prioritize the basketball experience and the player that those fans came to support. When that organization shifts its marketing focus and its on-court strategy in ways that seem to deprioritize that player, the fans feel the contract has been broken. The traditional right-leaning families that have flooded into the Fever's fan base are not monolithic. They have diverse views and backgrounds, but they do share certain common values. They tend to be skeptical of corporate activism. They tend to prefer entertainment that focuses on the sport itself rather than off-court messaging. They tend to want their sporting events to be family experiences rather than platforms for social statements. None of these positions are inherently unreasonable. They're just different from what urban progressive audiences might prefer. The problem the Indiana Fever has created is a fundamental mismatch between the marketing that attracted the new fan base and the product that's now being delivered. The team promised basketball. The team delivered basketball with a side of corporate activism presented by major corporations. The team promised to build around Caitlin Clark. The team implemented a coaching system that reduced her on-court influence. The team promised to represent the values and interests of Middle America. The team then made decisions that seemed to prioritize other audiences and other causes. This isn't to suggest that the organization shouldn't engage in any social initiatives or corporate partnerships. It's to suggest that there's a critical difference between authentic community engagement and what appears to be a sudden pivot away from the core audience that just rescued the franchise from irrelevance. When an organization shifts its messaging and its priorities in ways that feel alienating to the people financing the operation, the results are predictable. Those people find somewhere else to spend their money. The demographics matter because they determine the financial stability of the franchise. If you lose the traditional family audience, you're replacing them with an audience that doesn't exist yet or that isn't as invested in attending games in person. You're trading certainty for speculation. You're replacing a proven revenue source with hope that a different audience will materialize. And in business, you don't make that trade voluntarily. Mark June 4th on your calendar. That's the date everything either gets resolved or everything breaks. The Indiana Fever are scheduled to play the Atlanta Dream in what should be one of the most anticipated matchups of the WNBA season. Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese, two of the biggest stars in the league. Two players with a history of intense competition. A matchup that captures the attention of not just WNBA fans, but casual sports fans across the country who have been following the rivalry since these players competed in college basketball. This should be a marquee basketball moment. This should be a primetime event that the entire sports world is watching. The networks should be promoting this game weeks in advance. The merchandise should be selling. The excitement should be building. This should be the moment where the Indiana Fever demonstrate that they understand their opportunity and are committed to maximizing it. Instead, the organization has decided to brand this game as Pride Night, presented by Salesforce. That's not inherently a problem. Sports organizations host theme nights all the time: military appreciation nights, cancer awareness nights, mental health awareness nights, community celebration nights. The concept of a theme night is standard practice across professional sports, but the timing of this particular theme night, combined with everything else happening in the organization, has completely fractured the Fever's core paying audience. The announcement of Pride Night triggered an immediate and severe backlash across social media. The comment sections became a digital war zone. The ratio of negative comments to supportive comments was overwhelming. On some posts, the ratio hit 464 likes to nearly 300 furious comments. For context, a typical engagement ratio on social media might be 10 likes for every comment. A 464 to 300 ratio in the negative direction is extraordinary. It's the kind of engagement you see when an organization makes a decision that fundamentally offends or alienates a significant portion of its audience. People expressed frustration in the comments. Some were respectful, some were not, but the through line was consistent. Fans were saying they came to watch basketball. Fans were saying they didn't want the game to be about activist messaging. Fans were saying they came as families with children and didn't want that kind of content presented in that context. Fans were saying they felt alienated by an organization that seemed more interested in corporate activism than in basketball. The Indiana Fever's leadership attempted to frame this backlash as coming from a vocal minority or from people who aren't true fans. But you can't have 1,600 empty seats and simultaneously claim that your critics are a tiny fringe. You can't have that kind of engagement ratio on social media and claim that your audience is solidly behind you. The numbers don't support that narrative. The data contradicts it. And the organization's attempt to dismiss legitimate customer concerns as bigotry is the exact playbook that has destroyed massive entertainment franchises over the last 5 years. What makes June 4th the breaking point is that this game represents a test. It's a test of whether the organization understands its audience. It's a test of whether the marketing department recognizes the damage being done. It's a test of whether the front office will course correct or double down. The number of people in the stands on June 4th will send a message louder than any statement the organization could make. The social media engagement on June 4th will reveal whether the backlash is growing or subsiding. The Atlanta Dream are coming to Indianapolis. Angel Reese is coming to play against Caitlin Clark. This should be an absolute slam dunk from a basketball perspective. This should be a game that sells out naturally based on the competitive narrative alone. The fact that the organization felt compelled to create a theme night around this game suggests that they were already anticipating lower than expected ticket sales. They were already bracing for the possibility that a Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese matchup might not sell out on its own merit anymore. But that theme night has now created an entirely new layer of controversy. It's given fans who were already frustrated about the coaching system and the organization's direction a new focal point for their frustration. It's created a situation where people who might have attended the game as a basketball fan now have to make a decision about whether they're comfortable supporting an organization that's making them feel unwelcome. It's created a situation where families are having conversations at the dinner table about whether they should renew their season tickets. June 4th is the breaking point because it's the moment where the organization's leadership has to face the consequences of their decisions. It's the moment where empty seats become unavoidable. It's the moment where the organization can no longer claim that everything is fine and that criticism is coming from a fringe element. It's the moment where the numbers will be too big to ignore or reframe. Here's the trap that front office leadership is about to walk directly into, and history suggests they don't even see it coming. At some point very soon, probably within the next 3 weeks, a microphone is going to be placed in front of Amber Cox, Kelly Crosskopf, or Stephanie White. A reporter is going to ask about the empty seats. A reporter is going to ask about the social media backlash. A reporter is going to ask about the ticket sales drop, and the organization is going to have to respond. The instinct, based on how these situations have played out across the entertainment industry in recent years, will be catastrophic. The instinct will be to blame the fans. The instinct will be to call them a vocal minority. The instinct will be to suggest that these critics don't represent true fans of the game. The instinct will be to double down on the exact decisions that created the backlash in the first place. And the moment those words leave an executive's mouth, the organization will ignite a fire that they simply cannot put out. This is the exact destructive playbook that has torn apart massive entertainment empires over the last 5 years. We've watched it happen repeatedly. When consumers reject a product, when customers express dissatisfaction with the direction a company is moving, the worst possible maneuver that company can make is to attack the consumer. The worst possible decision is to alienate the people financing the entire operation by suggesting that their concerns are illegitimate, that they're not true fans, that they're motivated by bigotry rather than genuine feedback about the product. Lucasfilm and Disney deployed this exact strategy. When Star Wars fans expressed concerns about the direction of the franchise, leadership responded by attacking those fans. They called them toxic. They suggested that criticism of creative decisions was motivated by misogyny and bigotry. Instead of listening to customer feedback and adjusting course, they doubled down. What happened? The box office numbers collapsed, the viewership dropped, the merchandise sales declined, and the fan base fractured in a way that may be permanent. The franchise that was supposed to generate decade-long revenue streams suddenly became a financial liability. The same pattern has repeated itself across multiple entertainment properties. When audiences reject the product, leadership's response is to attack the audience rather than examine the product. And every single time, it makes the situation worse. Every single time, it accelerates the exodus of paying customers. Every single time, it turns a problem that might have been fixable into a crisis that becomes catastrophic. The Indiana Fever's leadership is being set up for this exact scenario. The data is going to force them to address the situation. The empty seats will demand explanation. The social media engagement will require response. And the instinct will be to blame the fans rather than to examine the decisions that created the problem. Because examining those decisions would require acknowledging that the coaching implementation and the marketing pivot were mistakes. It would require going back to the drawing board. It would require admitting that the organization misread its audience and its moment. But here's why that instinct will be catastrophic for the franchise. The people criticizing the organization aren't internet trolls or automated bots. They're verified paying customers. They're people who spent significant money to support this team. They're families who made a conscious decision to invest in the Fever because they believed in the team's direction and the player leading that direction. When you attack those people, when you dismiss their concerns, when you suggest that their criticism is motivated by bigotry, you're not winning an argument. You're burning bridges with the people who finance your operation. A father from Texas who bought season tickets to support Caitlin Clark doesn't see his criticism as bigoted. He sees it as legitimate feedback about a product he's investing money into. When the organization responds by calling him a bigot, by calling him a vocal minority, by suggesting he's not a true fan, that father doesn't engage in debate. That father cancels his season tickets. That father tells his friends about his experience. That father stops buying merchandise. That father takes his substantial disposable income and redirects it toward an entertainment option that doesn't make him feel attacked. You cannot antagonize the people financing your entire operation and expect positive results. You cannot attack your paying customers and expect them to remain loyal. You cannot dismiss legitimate feedback as bigotry and expect those customers to stay engaged. And if leadership makes the mistake of deploying this playbook, they will absolutely destroy the franchise in the process. The trap is set. The organization is walking directly toward it. And there's no evidence that anyone in leadership has the self-awareness or the humility to recognize what's about to happen. Let's zoom out from Indiana for a moment and look at what's happening across the entire WNBA. Because if you think this is just a localized Indiana problem, the national broadcast numbers just leaked, and they're absolutely terrifying for the entire league. These aren't rumors or speculation. These are actual viewing numbers from actual broadcasts on actual networks. A broadcast of the Las Vegas Aces, the back-to-back defending champions, on the USA Network pulled 343,000 viewers. Let that number sink in for a moment. The defending champions, one of the marquee franchises in the league, a nationally broadcast game on a major network, and 343,000 people watched it. For context, the studio show that aired immediately before that game pulled 400,000 viewers. More people watched the host desk analysis than watched the actual game. That's a historic disaster. To understand why this number is so catastrophic, you need to understand what the broadcast networks expected when they signed their contracts with the WNBA. They expected growth. They expected that the Caitlin Clark phenomenon would lift all boats. They expected that casual sports fans who were newly interested in women's basketball would distribute their viewership across the entire league, even if Clark was their primary draw. They expected 2 million, 3 million, maybe even 4 million viewer marks on primetime broadcasts. Instead, they got 343,000 viewers for the back-to-back champions. The networks that just cut massive checks for broadcasting rights are now staring at a terrifying financial reality. They made investments based on projections that aren't materializing. They bet billions of dollars on the assumption that the tide raised by Caitlin Clark would lift all boats. The rising tide happened. It lifted one specific boat, the boat the fans actually wanted to see. And it didn't lift any other boats. It didn't expand the overall audience for women's basketball. It redistributed the existing audience more heavily toward Caitlin Clark games. This is where the Indiana Fever's internal civil war becomes a league-wide existential threat. Because if the Fever are suppressing the Caitlin Clark factor through coaching philosophy and strategic decisions, then the entire financial structure of the WNBA starts to crumble. The USA Network, ESPN, and Prime Video didn't buy into the WNBA for sub-400K viewership. They didn't cut checks anticipating that a game featuring the back-to-back champions would pull less than 500,000 viewers. They bought into the WNBA based on the unprecedented viewership that Clark generated during her collegiate career and brought directly to Indianapolis. When Stephanie White's system suppresses that magic, the entire financial structure shudders. When the front office actively alienates the traditional family units that were driving the merchandise sales and the attendance numbers, the networks start calculating their losses. When viewership for non-Clark games continues to disappoint, the networks start looking at escape clauses in their contracts. Most broadcast agreements have exit clauses if performance metrics fall below agreed-upon thresholds. If the USA Network and ESPN start hitting those thresholds consistently, they might start looking for ways out. The 343,000 viewer number isn't just an embarrassment. It's a warning signal. It's the canary in the coal mine. It's the first data point suggesting that the Caitlin Clark bump might not be sustainable if the Fever continue down the current path. If Fever games start pulling similar numbers while supposedly featuring the league's biggest draw, the networks will be forced to renegotiate, and those renegotiations will be brutal. The networks will argue that the product they purchased wasn't delivered. They'll demand compensation or contract modifications. And the WNBA's financial structure, which was built on the assumption of sustained high viewership, will face a reckoning. The league spent 25 years struggling to consistently break 1 million viewers. For a quarter century, professional women's basketball operated at massive financial losses, heavily subsidized by the NBA. The league couldn't find an audience. The product couldn't resonate with mainstream America. The viewership remained stubbornly low no matter what the league tried. It was a chronic problem that seemed unsolvable. The league's leadership had essentially accepted that this was the financial reality of women's professional basketball. Then a miracle happened. Caitlin Clark arrived. She brought millions of new viewers. She demonstrated that there was actually a substantial audience for professional women's basketball if the right catalyst existed. She solved the quarter-century revenue problem in a single season. The league's broadcasting deals suddenly became valuable. Networks competed for rights. Sponsorships became available. The financial model shifted from loss-making to growth potential. Everything changed. But that changed future is only real if Caitlin Clark's impact continues to drive viewership and attendance. It's only real if the Fever use Clark to build a sustainable fan base in Indianapolis. It's only real if the organization recognizes that they're the custodians of the catalyst that transformed the entire league. If the Fever mismanage Clark, suppress her on-court impact, and alienate the audience that came specifically to watch her, the viewership will collapse. The 343,000 number will become standard. The broadcasting deals will become worthless. And the financial crisis that professional women's basketball has been trying to escape for 25 years will return with a vengeance. To understand the full scope of this disaster, you need to understand the historical timeline. The WNBA has been operating since 1996. For nearly 3 decades, the league struggled with a fundamental problem. It could not generate consistent, substantial viewership. The league operated at massive financial losses. The NBA subsidized the WNBA year after year. The league couldn't break through the cultural consciousness. It had fans, dedicated fans, but never enough casual viewership to make the business model sustainable on its own. Then, in 2024, something unprecedented happened. Caitlin Clark arrived. She brought with her an audience that the WNBA had been searching for since its inception. That audience was primarily from Middle America. Those were the families that had never watched professional women's basketball before. Those were the viewers who would have ignored the WNBA indefinitely if not for Clark's presence. That audience was substantial. That audience was valuable. That audience was willing to spend money. Caitlin Clark single-handedly solved the league's quarter-century revenue problem. She generated record-breaking jersey sales. She created unprecedented ticket demand across the entire country. She made professional women's basketball culturally relevant in a way that no player or marketing campaign had achieved in the league's history. She didn't just bring fans. She brought the kind of fans who were willing to invest significant disposable income into the product. The old guard of the WNBA, the organizations and leadership that had been carrying the league through its decades of financial struggle, suddenly found themselves in an unprecedented position. A new revenue stream had appeared. A new audience had materialized. The problem that had defined the league's existence seemed suddenly solvable. But instead of fully embracing that massive financial windfall, instead of recognizing that this was the opportunity they'd been waiting for, the old guard actively resisted it. The Indiana Fever's leadership, under the direction of Stephanie White, has actively resisted the very audience that Clark brought to the league. How? By implementing a coaching system that reduces her on-court influence, by shifting marketing focus away from their franchise player, by making decisions that seem designed to alienate the very demographic that just rescued the franchise from irrelevance, by pivoting the organization's cultural messaging in directions that contradict the values of the audience that was just attracted to the team. This is a bait-and-switch operation. The organization attracted fans through one promise, Basketball Revolution, featuring Caitlin Clark. Now the organization is delivering a different product, basketball mixed with corporate activism and reduced Clark impact. The organization took the money from those fans, season tickets, merchandise, parking, concessions. Now the organization is shifting its product mix in ways designed to drive away the audience that provided that revenue. It's one of the clearest examples of bait-and-switch strategy in recent sports history. Consider the timing and the messaging around the theme nights. In May, the entire month dedicated to military appreciation, the WNBA and the Fever offered 0 dedicated nights to honor the military community. 0 military appreciation nights. 0 recognition of that demographic's service and sacrifice. But the moment June arrives, the entire marketing apparatus shifts to promote an initiative presented by a major corporation. The contrast is stark. The message is clear. The organization has decided that one demographic is worth celebrating and promoting, and another demographic, the one that just rescued the franchise, is not worth the same level of commitment. The comment sections across the Fever's social platforms make this explicit. Fans are saying keep this out of here with families and children there. Fans are saying we came to see Caitlin Clark. Fans are saying stop marketing adult choices to children. These aren't cryptic or coded messages. These are straightforward expressions of what the paying customers expected when they invested their money into the organization. And the organization has effectively said that those expectations don't matter. The bait-and-switch is particularly damaging because it breaks trust. It's not just about current revenue. It's about future sustainability. When a consumer feels they've been deceived about what they're purchasing, they don't just stop buying. They become skeptical of anything that organization offers in the future. They tell their friends about their experience. They become advocates against the organization instead of advocates for it. The WNBA has historically relied on a very specific niche demographic to keep the lights on. That demographic is passionate. That demographic is loyal. That demographic kept professional women's basketball alive when viewership was in the hundreds of thousands nationwide. But that niche demographic never generated massive profit. They kept the operation running, but they didn't create growth. The new influx of fans, the traditional center-right, sports-first audience, brought the actual capital. They brought the money, they brought the growth, they brought the future. By intentionally shifting marketing focus back to the niche audience while holding onto the new audience's money, the Fever are executing a strategy that will have severe long-term consequences. They're trying to have it both ways. They're trying to keep the revenue stream while alienating the people generating it. That's not a sustainable business model. That's a pathway to disaster. Let's talk about money, because ultimately that's what determines whether an organization survives or collapses. Forget the cultural arguments. Forget the political debates. Forget the social media discourse. Let's talk about cold, hard economic reality. The math is devastating, and the numbers are only going to get worse if the organization continues down the current path. That single game with 1,600 empty seats represents approximately $150,000 to $200,000 in lost gate revenue. That's just the ticket price itself. That doesn't include concessions. That doesn't include parking. That doesn't include other ancillary revenue streams. When you factor in everything that goes with attendance at a sporting event, you're looking at roughly $200,000 to $300,000 in total lost revenue from that single night. And that's being conservative. Some estimates would suggest the number is even higher. Now multiply that across a season. If the Fever experience even a modest decline in average attendance, let's say the average drops by 500 seats per game across a 20-game home schedule, you're looking at $2 million to $3 million in lost gate revenue over the course of a season. Add in lost merchandise sales from fans not in attendance. Add in the reduced season ticket renewals as fans decide not to renew when the lease comes up. The total lost revenue climbs rapidly. But the economic damage extends beyond attendance. If viewership for Fever games continues to disappoint, if Fever games start pulling 500K to 700K viewers instead of the 1+ million that networks expected based on the Caitlin Clark factor, the networks start questioning their investment. The advertising rates for Fever games were based on viewership expectations. If viewership disappoints, the advertising rates decline. If advertising rates decline, the broadcast revenue drops. The revenue that was supposed to be locked in becomes variable and unstable. The television rights deal that was celebrated as a landmark achievement is built on the assumption of sustained high viewership. Networks have escape clauses. Advertisers track engagement metrics. If the click-through rate on Fever content continues to plummet, if the ad dollars start vanishing, the networks can invoke those clauses. They can renegotiate from a position of power. They can demand reductions in the rights fees or modifications to the contract terms. That revenue that was supposed to be guaranteed becomes uncertain. Sponsorships work the same way. Salesforce is presenting Pride Night because they're paying for that sponsorship. They're paying for the brand association, the visibility, and the access. But if the game doesn't draw a substantial audience, if the event becomes associated with controversy and empty seats, the sponsorship becomes less valuable. Sponsors track brand sentiment. They track social media engagement. If a sponsorship becomes associated with negative sentiment, the sponsor's ROI declines. Sponsors don't renew deals that aren't delivering value. They look for alternative properties. They demand price reductions. They move their money elsewhere. The merchandise business is particularly sensitive to this kind of organizational turmoil. Caitlin Clark merchandise was flying off shelves. The demand was insatiable. But merchandise sales are driven by emotional connection and positive sentiment. If the fan base becomes fractured, if significant portions of the audience feel alienated, merchandise sales decline. The fans who were buying Clark jerseys, Clark hats, Clark apparel for themselves and their families start hesitating. They're not sure if they want to give money to an organization that seems hostile to their values. The merchandise revenue that seemed like a guaranteed revenue stream becomes unstable. Season ticket renewals are the foundation of any sports franchise's financial stability. Locked-in revenue that can be projected years in advance. The Fever had unprecedented demand for season tickets when Clark arrived. That demand has been replaced by uncertainty. Fans are now questioning whether they should renew. They're wondering if the organization is moving in a direction that's no longer welcoming to them. Season ticket holders are having conversations with their families about whether to invest another year. When renewal time comes, a significant portion of those people will decide not to renew. That locked-in revenue disappears. The Stephanie White effect isn't just a coaching philosophy. It's not just a strategic choice about how to use one player on the court. The Stephanie White effect is an economic wrecking ball swinging directly toward the franchise's vault. Every decision that contributes to this effect has financial consequences. Every empty seat is lost money. Every canceled season ticket is future money that won't arrive. Every fan who decides to spend their money on a different entertainment option is revenue that's permanently lost. The breaking point is coming within 3 weeks. The June 4th game against the Atlanta Dream will generate attendance numbers. Those numbers will either confirm that the problem is manageable or reveal that the situation is deteriorating. If attendance is lower than expected, if the empty seats return or exceed the previous low, the financial implications become impossible to ignore. If merchandise sales decline from what was expected, the board of directors will start having serious conversations about whether the current direction is sustainable. The organization has 3 choices at that point. They can course correct, acknowledge the mistakes that were made, and recommit to the audience and the player that made their current financial position possible. They can double down on the current approach and accept the financial consequences. Or they can attempt a middle path, trying to maintain both audiences while ultimately satisfying neither. Based on historical precedent and the organization's decision-making to date, they're likely to choose the worst option. And when they do, the economic damage will accelerate beyond the point of easy recovery. The Indiana Fever are approaching a moment of reckoning that will define the franchise's future for the next decade. Every decision made in the next 3 weeks will have consequences that extend far beyond this season. The June 4th game against the Atlanta Dream isn't just another basketball game. It's a referendum on the organization's direction and its understanding of its own moment. The attendance numbers, the merchandise sales, the social media sentiment, all of it will send a message about whether the foundation is solid or whether it's cracking. The most dangerous moment for any organization is when success creates complacency. When a miracle happens, when a generational talent arrives and solves problems that seemed unsolvable, leadership often misinterprets the situation. They think the miracle was inevitable. They think they can shift focus and still maintain the results. They think the audience they attracted will stay loyal regardless of the product being delivered. History suggests otherwise. The organizations that mismanage their miracles tend to lose them, and they lose them quickly. The Indiana Fever have been given an extraordinary gift. They've been given an audience that the WNBA waited 25 years to find. They've been given a player who generates unprecedented interest. They've been given a moment that comes once in a generation. What they do with that gift in the next 3 weeks, and in the weeks and months that follow, will determine whether this becomes a dynasty or a cautionary tale.